Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome. You are at Sustainable Braintree's first ever community webinar. I am your host, Rachel Horak, a member of Sustainable Braintree. And if you have any technical support, then you just put my name in the chat and I'll help you out at any time during this webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll be sent a link to this webinar to watch the recording after this event, probably this weekend in a couple of days. Okay. At any time during this webinar today, you can pose questions to Louise, our speaker, by putting it in the chat box, and I will see it. And today, Louise is going to talk to us for about 20 to 30 minutes, and afterwards, she'll be taking all of your questions. So do write down your questions into the chat box whenever you think of them, and we'll have her address them at the end. Okay. So today's speaker is Louise Quigley. She's been a member of Sustainable Braintree, and she's been gardening and landscaping and writing about it for 40 years. She's a member of the Wild Ones Natural Landscapers and Grow Natives Massachusetts, which are two organizations that promote the use of native plants in the garden. And she's very active in the Jewish Climate Action Network, as well as in our organization, Sustainable Braintree. The title of today's talk is Native Plants and Gardening to Support the Biosphere. She'll explain to us why this is a crisis and offer some simple steps that everybody can make for the better, including specific actions that homeowners can take to restore and regenerate the biosphere. So with that, I'm going to bring up her presentation and let her take over from here. So hang on it's going to take me just a second. Get the presentation going, and then you can have at it.
Okay. And here we go. Okay. So this talk is about what we can do to preserve and restore nature, especially regarding the use of native plants and certain gardening techniques. I want to start by very briefly pointing out that humans have caused ecological problems that have now become critical. And why that's a problem for us as well as for the rest of life on Earth. Then I'll go on to talk at more length about things that everybody can do, whether you have property or not, to be part of the solution, and then specifically about what people who do have a bit of property can do in their landscapes. First slide, please. That's what I'm going to be talking about. Okay. Problems caused by human activity. So the reason that we need to think about this has to do with the fact that humans have been affecting the biosphere since the dawn of agriculture, probably earlier, and mostly not for good. I don't want to dwell on the negative, but very briefly, problems include, next slide, deforestation, cutting down trees, forests, and filling wetlands to grow crops, because that means loss of habitat, and we've been doing it for 10,000 years. So we've done so much of it that now it's become critical. Species are being squeezed out of existence simply because they have no place to live anymore. For example, destroying the Amazon rainforest, but also destroying hedgerows next to farm fields and the wildflowers that grow around farm fields, which were the Monarch Butterfly habitat, cutting down mangrove swamps, overfishing, especially since the advent of industrial trawlers in the last few decades, overgrazing on public lands, damming rivers, which produces energy from non-fossil fuels but destroys river ecosystems. There's climate change from industrial pollution, which is further stressing species that are already squeezed by habitat loss, and is also damaging coral reefs, and so on. Next slide. And then there are the lawn and agricultural chemicals, the pesticides and the herbicides and the overuse of chemical fertilizers. I think the hazmat suit says it all, doesn't it? This stuff is seriously poisonous. And by the way, when the lawn companies send people out to spray your lawn, they should give them hazmat suits and they don't. And the problem is that 99% of the bugs are beneficial or neutral. And these chemicals kill everything, not just the very, very few pests. And there are other ways to deal with the pests. They also, when you spray herbicides, all the susceptible weeds die, and the ones that are left can survive the chemicals and are super weeds. So there's a lot of ways that we've been causing problems. Next slide. That this is not only a problem for us, it's a problem for the whole, or rather, it's not just a problem for the biosphere, but it's also a problem for human beings. Because for one thing, it's leading to so great a loss of plants and creatures that scientists are now talking about an insect apocalypse and a sixth mass extinction event on Earth. The reason that's a problem for us is that we depend on what's called ecosystem services. That's the current buzzword, and it's about the benefits that are provided by a living biosphere that we depend on our own selves. And what we're doing is cutting that right out from under ourselves. For example, next slide. Next slide. There we go. There is a bee pollinating a fruit tree. And in fact, if we don't have bees, which are now both honeybees and native bees are drastically declining. But if we don't have bees, most of the fruits and quite a few of the vegetable crops that we want to eat, we don't have. But other things that you might not have thought of, we need beetles and microbes. I am not going to show you a slide of something decaying and something dead being processed by the forces of decay, because that would be icky. But if beetles and maggots and microbes did not work on organic things that die, plants and animals, they wouldn't decay, they would just pile up, and the nutrients would not be recycled, and we would be choked by all the dead matter. We need a functioning biosphere. Wetlands provide flood control, but they also clean water, and by retaining water, provide drought control. Bats and dragonflies and wood turtles eat mosquitoes. And humans are healthier and happier when we can connect with nature. There have been some really interesting studies. Hospital patients that can see grass and trees and flowers out their window use less pain meds and recover faster than hospital patients in an inside room or just looking at a blank wall. If you have an inner city and on one block, there's a little bit of a park with a little bit of grass and a couple of trees and a bench, there's less crime on that block than there is on the block, one block over, that doesn't get a look at nature. It's kind of subtle, but it's becoming very clear that there's a reason for forest bathing, that people need to connect with nature. So for all these reasons, it's a problem that we're imperiling the biosphere. And the good news is that there's a lot we can do to change the story. People can preserve and repair the biosphere instead of damage it. Everyone can help, and we do need to act, and we need to act now. No more waiting. Next slide. Which is to talk about things that everyone can do, whether you have land or not. And the first thing is, next slide. Minimize your, this is an image of plastic pollution and it's icky. You can do something about that by minimizing your use of single-use plastic. And push for bans on single-use plastic. And it's hard. I mean, plastic is just everywhere. I'm a gardener. I went to the garden store today and I bought some flats and let's see, there we go. This was in the flats. It's very handy. It tells me what it was I was buying and tells me that bell peppers need full sun, which I kind of knew. But it used to be that I would stick these things in the ground with my plants so that I'd remember what I planted where. And if the neighbors came by and was wondering what a particular flower was, they would see the little thing. And then I started noticing that the next spring, I find pieces of these things that they don't last, they break apart and they become little bits of plastic. So I've stopped putting them in the ground. As it's a learning curve for everybody, but as we learn, we can start doing something to minimize our use of plastic. I learned long ago to bring my cloth bags to the grocery store with me. And then, so trying to minimize our use of plastic, push for bans, and what plastic you do end up with, dispose of properly. You know, make sure that it's wrapped up so that it's going to end up in the landfill, but at least it won't end up in little bits getting into the waterways where sea turtles will eat it and they can't digest it and their stomachs fill up and they starve to death. And that's actually happening. So what plastic you do have to use, make sure that it's disposed of properly so that it doesn't end up out there in the waterways and birds' nests and such. So that's one thing we can do is minimize plastic. Next slide, please. There we go. Another big thing that everybody can do is buy organic to the maximum extent possible. It's very simple. The definition of organic is that it does not have, it was grown without the use of chemical pesticides, chemical herbicides, chemical fertilizers. So to the extent that all those things are really bad, and they really are, simply each time you make a choice to buy organic, you're decreasing your personal impact in the sense of those uses of those toxic chemicals. And by the way, that also goes for organic fabric, organic cotton, and buying natural fabrics, cotton and linen and wool instead of synthetics, which are made of plastic. And when you wash them, little micro bits get into the waterways. So these are things that one can do. Next slide, please. Some of us are vegetarian, but most of us are not. And when you use animal products, again, to the maximum extent that you can manage it, go for 100% grass pastured. It makes a big difference. For one thing, if animals are raised in confinement or in feedlots, their feed is grown using all those nasty chemicals, using huge gas guzzling machinery, using pesticides and herbicides, and then it's put on trucks and trucked from Iowa to Texas. So there's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions in conventional animal agriculture, which you completely bypass if you're buying grass pastured. Yeah, grass pastured animal products maybe probably are somewhat more expensive than factory farmed, but you'll be a little healthier if you eat more plants and less animals. And the animals will be happier. And to the extent that pasture means rotational regenerative grazing, that is a huge impact for the good, because the schema is that you can see those cows are all bunched together. In rotational grazing, the farmer arranges for the animals to be all bunched together, so they all graze intensively for a short period of time, and then they're moved to another bit of pasture, and they graze there for a short bit of time, and then they're moved around. So the farmer has to keep moving them around, but that means that the grass and other plants stay healthy, and they regrow before the cows or chickens or pigs or whatever it is get back to them. And the result is that they get nice deep roots, and it becomes a healthy turf. And the more roots are in the ground, the more microbes are in the ground. And the healthier the turf, the more microbes, the more living that turf is. All those microbes are pulling carbon down out of the atmosphere and sequestering it in the soil. Some studies may even suggest that it may be, notice all the hedge words, because the final answers aren't in on this as far as I understand, but it may be that even though the animals obviously emit a certain amount of methane, it may be that that's actually counteracted by the healthiness of the soil. So regenerative rotational grazing, by sequestering carbon in the soil and actually drawing carbon down out of the atmosphere, is a significant part of the climate solution. So that's another reason that any animal products you use, if they're from grass pastured animals, that works away from being part of the problem and towards being part of the solution to a noticeable extent. So minimizing plastic, buying organic, using grass pastured animal products are things that everybody can do, even if you live in an apartment. But talking about grass leads to issues of soil and turf. And next slide, please. That leads to things that property owners can do. Although the landscape they show here is not that. The landscape that we show here is what you can do. Look at all that beautiful clover, and there's something green, yellow in there up at the front. This is a good, healthy turf. First thing you can do is start with your own turf and rethink the lawn. Make what lawn you keep maintained organically, and don't be afraid of the clover. I call it Versailles Turf because I once had the opportunity to visit Versailles in France, the great pleasure palace of the last kings of France. And I tell you, you tour that palace and you know why the French did a revolution. The gold on the walls is unbelievable. And then you go outside because there's this huge set of pleasure gardens, which are part of the palace grounds. And when you get up close to them, what you see is, I mean, it's green, it's short, it's beautiful. You get up close and you notice that there's some grass and some clover and some dandelions and some plantains and some more grass and these little marguerites, these little daisy-like things, and some clover and some yarrow and some grass. It's full of broad leaves. And if you keep it, if you don't like the look of the clovers, just mow it before they flower, and no one will ever know they're there. But if it was good enough for the Sun King, it's good enough for you. And in fact, by the way, it was always considered that a healthy lawn was one that had clover in it, until about the 1950s, and the chemical companies had these herbicides and they wanted to be able to sell them. So they started ad campaigns to convince people that the only good lawn is a grass-only lawn. Don't fall for it. Keep it mown, keep it watered if you want to, and from 10 feet away, nobody will know that your lawn is healthy and living. And just like in the regenerative grazed pasture, if you're not using the chemicals and if you're letting all those different kinds of plants grow, the soil becomes full of their roots, and the roots support the microbes, and that becomes a healthy soil that sequesters carbon. So that's one thing, is to rethink how you take care of whatever lawn you do have. But the second thing is shrink the lawn. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what not to do. Look at all that grass and notice that there's nothing there but grass, which means that it's all full of chemicals. But just think how much time and gasoline it takes to mow that thing. That is not an ecologically beneficial situation. But then also look beyond it. You have some shrubs, and they're all placed just so, with a whole bunch of space in between them. It looks nice, but almost certainly, almost everything there is non-native. And that gets into the whole thing of the need for native plants to support the native bugs, and the native bugs are what supports the ecosystem. Basically, what this is an aesthetically attractive biotic desert, because the only things alive there are those exotic plants and that vast chemical lawn. So that's what not to do. Next slide, please. Now, this is much better. And notice there's a little bit of lawn along the side there, because their lawn does have some use. It's good for access. If you want to be able to walk on a neat sward from the house back through your yard to get access to other parts of the yard, grass is good for that. If your family plays croquet, you need a little bit of lawn to set up your croquet court. If you have kids, you might want some grass under the play set for kids to run around on. And it makes the yard look tended. Even this huge planting of native plants, because there's that little strip of green, anyone going by can tell that you did this on purpose. This is not a weed patch. This is an intended and a tended planting. And just that little strip of lawn says that. So lawn has its uses, but you really only want to have as much lawn as you're actually going to use for purposes that lawn is the thing to use it for, if you follow that. Use lawn when it's useful for, but that's all the lawn you need. And think how much time and work and expense in watering and greenhouse gas emissions from power mowers that you'll save by having that much less lawn to tend. And then what you want to do in the portions of your lawn that you're getting rid of and where the exotic plants used to be is plant natives, because to the biosphere, all plants are not equal. Next slide, please. There we have a monarch butterfly on a milkweed. That's kind of the classic example of a general principle in nature. It goes like this. Plants do not want to be eaten. Bugs want to eat plants. So plants develop defenses against being eaten. But the particular species of bug that find a way around the defense then have a whole field full of stuff to eat. So most of our insects have developed to be able to use certain native plants. They have not co-evolved with plants that come from other parts of the world. So they can't use them. So if we want to have monarch butterflies, we have to have milkweeds and butterfly weeds. That's not butterfly plant, which is an exotic. It's butterfly weed, which is about 2-3 feet tall and has bright orange flowers. And the thing is that the plants are eaten by the bugs, but the bugs are the base of the food chain for the rest of the whole food web, really. And enormous amounts of bugs are needed. Someone set up, as a graduate student project, I believe it was, set up cameras to look at birds' nests of songbirds to actually find out what do parent birds feed their chicks and how much. What they found out was that each nest full of songbirds, about 90% of what they get fed is caterpillars, and it takes about 6,000 to 8,000 caterpillars to get each nest full of birds from hatching until they fly on their own. That means that if we want to have birds singing in this spring, we need an awful lot of caterpillars. And to have enough caterpillars and other insect life to, I mean, that it's not just birds that eat bugs, toads do, and frogs do, and bats do. In order to have a functioning ecosystem, you gotta have lots of bugs. To have lots of bugs, the bugs have to have what they eat, and what they eat is the native plants. And that's why it really becomes very important to plant native plants. Okay. So butterfly weed is good, butterfly plant is useless. And if you want to know what, I don't really have time or opportunity here to give everybody a list, but Native Plant Trust, they're the people that have Garden in the Woods in Framingham, and National Wildlife Federation. Both have good websites that list good choices for native plants that people can choose. And also, might be a time to mention that there are two groups associations that have that people can join for further information and for mutual encouragement. One is Wild Ones, which is a national organization, but there is a South Shore Boston area chapter. So Wild Ones, South Shore Boston, and Grow Natives Massachusetts are two good associations that people can look to for advice. Okay, next. Okay, we are on the next slide. Here we are. So that's one thing, big thing people can do is plant natives. But then the next big thing people can do is leave the leaves. What this picture shows is someone who has raked their leaves. What they now need to do is push the leaves back so they're around the base of the tree. It's a nuisance to try to mow right around the base of a tree anyway. But the important thing is that the larvae and eggs of a lot of those caterpillars are going to overwinter in the leaves. So you don't want to rake the leaves up and send them off to the landfill. You want to keep all those good larvae overwintering on your property. So obviously, presumably you're now deciding that you're going to turn half of your lawn into native habitat. The part of the lawn you're going to keep, you rake the leaves off of, but you leave the leaves on the rest of it. And by the way, if leaves sit on top of grass, the grass dies. So there is no quicker, easier, no work way to get rid of grass than to just leave the leaves on it. So leaving the leaves is really important and a big piece of what you can do to bring life to your property. Okay. Another thing that I want to talk about is in regard to vegetable and flower gardens, because for them too, there are several techniques to make them especially biotically useful. Besides using dead last year's leaves for mulch, I'll talk about mulch in a minute. Again, go organic, raise things organically. Use organic soil amendments like compost, whether it's homemade or commercial. A group called Black Earth and another one called Coast of Maine both provide commercial compost that's commercially made that you can buy at garden stores. But you also even want to avoid organic pesticides. For example, there's something called BT, stands for Bacillus thuringiensis, which is accepted as a pesticide. It kills caterpillars and other insect larvae. And it's organic. It's a bacillus. It's a caterpillar disease, basically. Harmless to humans, harmless to other animals, but it kills indiscriminately. It's not only going to kill the mosquito larvae. If you spray it because you have tomato hornworms, you're also going to lose the monarch caterpillars. So you want to be real careful, even with organic pesticides. Sometimes nature will take care of things for you. I once had an experience many years ago. I planted some roses, and one day I came out and with horror observed that my roses were covered with aphids eating away. And I was having fits because I didn't want to spray chemicals, but I didn't want my roses to die. And for 2 or 3 days, I dithered. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I went out and I looked again, and there were ladybugs all over the rose bushes, eating up the aphids as fast as they could. It just took them a couple of days to find the feast, and the ladybugs took care of the aphids. So sometimes it's just a matter of not panicking right away. Give nature time, a little chance to see if nature will take care of it. Other things people do is you can use companion planting. Any number of garden books have lists of good companion plants, but some flowers that are pretty low garden flowers attract the pests away from your crops. Other pretty garden flowers, I'm thinking marigolds, I planted some yesterday, repel pests. So companion planting is good. Beer traps don't kill anything except slugs, and that's fine. People have been known to just go and pull the pest bugs off of their crops and squish them. So there are a lot of ways. And then what you see here in this picture is row cover. For example, cabbage butterflies can be their larvae can be pretty destructive. You just put this is a very lightweight covering, which lets light and rain in, but keeps the cabbage moths from depositing their eggs on your, whatever that crop that was. So that row covers are therefore a safe way to protect crops. I have a problem with rabbits, turkeys, and deer. The deer are terrible. Fencing. I put up netting around two of my garden plots, and then I don't want to put fencing because I'm not sure how it would look in my front yard garden, so I use bird netting there. And that does protect the my tomatoes from being savaged by the deer. So there are many ways to protect the desired plants other than killing things. And finally, avoid bare ground. Next slide, please. Cover crops. Cover crops, once again, put roots in the ground, which increases soil fertility, decreases the loss of carbon from the soil. But cover crops and also mulch, which you'll see in a minute, both have the effect of moderating soil temperatures, keep things from getting too cold in cooler parts of the growing season, keep things from getting too hot during the middle of the summer, and also help retain moisture. Next slide. There we go. This would be in a place where you want it to look all nice. That looks like a couple of ornamental lavenders there. And that's the mulch being placed so that there's no bare ground. You want to have no bare ground. The best mulch is, of course, something organic. I like to use grass clippings because my garden is organic, so the grass clippings are safe. Or some of the leaves that I kind of rake to the side in the fall can come and be between my plants. You can, anything that's organic that'll decay is good to go for mulch. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. To summarize, we really do at this point all need to be active to counter the environmental destruction that's been going on for so long and is still going on around us. And there's a great deal that each of us can do to be part of the solution. And now I expect that some questions have come up that Rachel can feed me.
They have. So I'll let Louise take a drink while I get some questions pulled up. And I'd like to remind our audience that tonight's webinar is our first in a series of webinars for Sustainable Braintree. And Sustainable Braintree is a community advocacy group committed to helping Braintree residents, community groups, businesses, and local governments conserve energy, promote clean and renewable energy, protect and restore the environment, and live a sustainable, healthy lifestyle. We have 5 key focus areas listed at the bottom. And we do want to hear from you. So we have social media accounts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Pick your favorite media outlet and go join us tonight. And we keep all of our followers informed of our goings on and some very critical updates involving like local politics, things like the compressor station. We try to stay and keep our members informed. We do encourage you to become a member tonight. So there's our website, sustainablebraintree.org/membership is where you can go get yourself a membership. It's only $15 for individuals and $30 for families. And your support of our nonprofit community advocacy group does support all of our functions. So let's have some questions now. Are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Right. So I have a traditional lawn, grass, and I want to mix in some other plants into the turf. What would be your best recommendation? Clover or some other small plants, or would it be something like micro clover?
Regular clover is just fine. Like I said, all you do is just keep it mown and the clover leaves and roots will do their thing of fixing nitrogen, which fertilizes the lawn and sequesters carbon. What I've done is simply taken kind of a hands-off approach, and you wouldn't believe how many interesting things have shown up. There's Creeping Charlie in my lawn, which I like a lot. It has pretty little flowers and it's low and covers the ground. I've got some moss showed up. I've got barren strawberry is what it's called. It's not a strawberry at all. But it's a low growing ground cover with yellow flowers in about a month. It showed up. So I'm not sure that one actually needs to deliberately plant things. I have dandelions. I like dandelions. Dandelion is the ultimate cut and come again vegetable. Before early in the spring, before it puts up a flower bud, the leaves are very tasty in salads. But also the scientific name of dandelion is Taraxacum officinalis. Anything with officinalis in it means it came out of the medical storeroom. Dandelions were actually deliberately planted, and it's an exotic, but it's naturalized here. And we can use it because it has many medicinal uses, actually. And it's certainly tasty, and all parts of it are edible. So if you don't like the seed heads, just mow them and nobody will see them.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had a question about how do you consider something to be native? Like, what is, by definition, how do we know that it's a native plant?
Yeah, that's a pretty vexed question. For one thing, are we looking at something that's native to the United States, or are we looking for something that's native to our area? And yeah, what do we mean by native? Something that was growing here 500 years ago, before colonists came from other parts of the world, bringing either intentionally or accidentally their seeds of plants from Europe with them. There's a lot of question about what's native to an area, what's native to a part of the world. There are some plants which naturally are widely distributed, like the amelanchier, which is a small tree. It has a lot of names: Juneberry, serviceberry, shadbush, shadblow. And the reason it has so many names is that it's native from Canada to Georgia and anywhere east of the Mississippi. It's got a very wide range of distribution, and different amelanchier species will be found in different places. But yeah, you can, if you wanted to grow a Juneberry in California, it would be a non-native. If you want to grow a Juneberry here, it is a native. What about azaleas or rhododendrons, which are actually native to further south than here? They like to grow in higher elevations in the Smoky Mountains. That's where they really come from. But because they're hardy, they can be grown, and as we've probably noticed, they're all over the place around here, although they're not really native to New England. I do have a book which I found in the bookstore at Garden in the Woods, which tells me what plants are actually native to our greater area. But in the description of each plant, it tells me where it actually is native to. So, but then there's also the fact that with climate change, if things are getting warmer, should people be planting a plant that's really native to a little further south here, so that it'll be here when the climate changes? So I think I'm not able to give you a very definitive answer, but I can at least illuminate the issue and some of the questions around that very complicated question.
Thanks. And I'm going to go look up all of the resources and I put them in the chat for folks. The Native Plant Trust, the NWF, wildones.org, and Grown Native Mass. I think I'm going to go start to educate myself, because myself I have a ton of rhododendron and azaleas, and I was wondering about that.
I love azaleas. They're one of my favorite things. And there was an azalea and a couple of rhodies growing on the property when we bought the place, and I have let them stay. But the Pyrrhus is not doing so well, and I'm going to get rid of it and replace it with American highbush cranberry. That's a viburnum species plant, and that is native. So that's another thing you can do. As you don't have to, you probably don't want to try to change everything at once, but step by step, Since the pirises, which are not natives, aren't doing well anyway, I'm going to replace them with something that is.
Great. One person said, I have this plant that's growing very well on my property. I didn't plant it, and it seems to be doing great without me. Can I assume that it's a native plant, or can I not assume that if it's growing?
No, you can't. In
Mm.
fact, right now we have a terrible problem because we're all being invaded by garlic mustard. That is flowering right now at about 2 feet tall with pretty white flowers, and each plant can make thousands of seeds. They all germinate and they'll completely take over. It's a non-native and it's a very invasive thing. So just because it's thriving, unfortunately, does not mean it's cool.
So what do you do for the garlic mustard? Because somebody did write in the chat. They said it's growing like all
Like
over.
a weed.
Keep up with it. What do you do?
Okay, the one good thing is that if you seize it by the bottom, you can pull it up very easily. So you just go through and with plastic bags and you bag it all, you pull it all up, you put it in a plastic bag, you tie it tight, and you put it in the garbage. That stuff you don't dare try to compost, because once it flowers, it can set seed. And once it seeds, you're in trouble. Someone, I just saw a flash on the chat, someone said, eat it. And it is true, garlic mustard is called that because it tastes good. Although it probably tastes better before it flowers. But that is an invasive that can be controlled with a fork and knife.
Now here's a question. It's a little bit of a deviation, but this person wants to know how to protect families and pets from ticks and mosquitoes safely. You talked a lot about pesticides that are not good for our lawns and our plants.
Yeah.
What do we use for ticks and mosquitoes for?
Okay. Mosquitoes, you can put, there are some nice herbal mosquito repellents. There are a number of herbs. I believe mint is one of them. But you can find them if you look, like in health food stores, and you read the ingredients label. But there are things you can apply to your skin that will keep the mosquitoes from biting you. Also, with mosquitoes, the larvae mature in standing water. So if you have a bird bath, keep changing the water. When I did put a mosquito dunk, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, which I talked about before, inside my rain barrel, so that because the BT is harmless to the plants that I would put the water on, and confined inside the rain barrel, it won't be poisoning caterpillars that I want to preserve. But it will kill the mosquito larvae. So mosquito dunks in a pool or something like that are useful, because that's a carefully controlled use of the BT. So that's some things, but basically don't let, after it rains, if you see that there's something that has standing water in it, dump it out. And that should help control the mosquitoes. Ticks are, what I do is, if I've been sitting among the leaves, I do a tick check on myself. I saw a great cartoon of a couple strolling through woods, and one of them saying to the other very romantically, when we get home, let's light a fire, open a bottle of wine, and check each other for ticks. Uh,
It's
Pets,
true. I have small children and they go hiking on the Blue Hills, and you bet that I am checking them for ticks after every hike.
yeah. For pets, that's kind of a concern because of course you don't want your pets getting tick bit or bringing ticks and fleas into your house. But you also want to be kind of careful about the commercial flea collars. I worry about what's in them and whether that's safe for the pets, really. I don't, I have cats and I keep them inside. They don't need flea collars because they don't get outside. If you take your dog for a walk, that's something that I don't have a dog, so I'm not as confident to talk about, but I would think that it would, if I had a dog, what I would be investigating would be some sort of repellent that would be less toxic and hopefully not toxic to my pet, would be what I would be looking for.
Excellent. And in case you missed it, there's a nice discussion in the chat about city ordinances, and the city of Somerville recently passed an ordinance requiring native plantings in their city-owned parks and open spaces. And maybe as an organization, we think about that as maybe one of our future initiatives for sustainable Braintree. Maybe. And we're almost at the end of our hour, and we have one more question. So you talked a lot about what homeowners can do, but we do have a lot of people in the audience that are not homeowners, and they live in apartment buildings or smaller places. What are maybe your top 3 tips to help live a better sustaining lifestyle? Would it be something like consuming goods from locally, like from a farmer's market? Would it be having certain types of plants? What would be your top 3 recommendations for non-homeowners?
Local organic food, control your use of plastic, and the farmers markets are a particularly good place to find all grass pastured animal products. So yeah, farmers markets are very good in many ways.
They are. And if I remember right, our Braintree one has one first Saturday of June, and then it'll start regularly on Saturdays, maybe around the 20th or so.
Something like that.
I love that farmers market.
Before the Braintree Farmers Market starts up, people in a number of areas can connect with this Market Today app. That's the word market and the number 2 and then day, the word day. And we were using them last year when, because of the pandemic, we didn't want to go to the farmers market. We were kind of hunkering down. You order from them by Thursday, and on Saturday, they'll fill your order and deliver it to you. They charge a few dollars for the delivery, but it's a way to shop the farmers market, even if you are staying away from markets at this point.
Right.
And they're functioning now, so you can work with them before the Braintree Farmers Market opens.
Excellent. And if I remember, someone put in the chat, Market Today, and you do have to order by a Thursday, and it has got me before. It's Friday. I'm like, I want a delivery. So yeah, try to remember Thursdays are your deadlines. So with that, we're at our hour, and I'm going to remind everybody, I just put in the chat, Sustainable Braintree memberships do support our activities for our community advocacy nonprofit. So do consider becoming a member today, and you can find the URL in the chat box. If that's something you're not interested in, go follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and stay informed of all the happenings and all of the important developments related to living a sustainable and healthy lifestyle. And you will be receiving a recording to this webinar to your email that you registered with. And do pay attention to our website and our newsletter and social media feeds for future webinars that we intend to host in future months. So with that, I'll give Louise a round of applause and thank her very much for your expertise and sharing your knowledge today. I can see people on their cameras also giving you a clap. So we greatly appreciate your work with us today. And
I had fun. I hope I was of use to people.
absolutely, we greatly appreciate it. And if you wish, you can put your email in the chat box if people want to get in touch with you. Would you like to try that?
Oh, sure. Oh.